What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode for the Men and Uncaged. If you don't know, this channel is all about the journey to the top 1%. And how do we get there? It's by becoming 1% better daily. Today, I wanted to talk about vanity and ego, stuff like that, because it's come up in conversation a lot more so, or maybe I'm just paying a little bit more attention to it as of lately. But I really just wanted to drive home the fact that, ego, really, I don't even understand how to get to the base of who entitled us to even have egos. But not only that, but put out a huge disclaimer and warning that if you don't get your ego in check, you will end up broke, alone, and in an early grave. I've seen it over and over. I've seen people crash and burn all because they were not willing to put their ego and their pride aside. Now, listen, I'm all for, taking pride in the things that you do, taking them seriously, doing things the right way and stuff like that. But when your pride starts to get in the way, when your pride starts to affect the way that you treat others, when your pride starts to affect the way that you view yourself, that ego starts coming out and it starts producing a very toxic environment. And I have seen people lose all of their finances due to their ego. I've seen people lose their entire families due to their ego. And then I've seen dudes that have literally destroyed their health because they were putting things in priority over taking care of themselves, both mentally and physically, as far as health goes, where they would go out of their way to sacrifice mental and physical health to accomplish something, to achieve something, to have some accolades, to be able to brag about it, to be able to act like they're better than someone else. And all the while, I can tell you this with 100% certainty, there's some people out there that I know and that you probably know that do all this for show. They do all this for the look at me's. They do all this because they want people to think a certain type of way. But those people go to bed miserable every night. They wake up every day full of anxiety and depression. And at what cost? What is the point of having an ego if you're depressed and anxious 24/7? I'm genuinely why would we? What is it about an ego and pride that we have of ourselves if we can't even be happy with ourselves? You see, a lot of this, and I'm not here to take away from people that have awesome goals. There is a lot to be said to having goals, having dreams, having these audacious just experiences that you want to have. And I don't care if that is something tangible, intangible. I don't care if that has a monetary value to it. If it matters to you, I'm 100% here for gamifying things. I'm 100% here for rewarding yourself for hard work. However, people have to understand and really get to the bottom of why they want some of these things, right? It's kind of comical to me that as I've grown, people like to shit talk and people like to rag me and stuff. But I used to live every moment of my life through social media. I mean, there was nothing that we did or didn't do that you didn't know about on my Facebook or my Instagram or, whatever the social media was at the time. And, social media queen, this, that, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You get those nicknames. And then as I've started to develop and as I've started to grow, I've realized that I've posted less and less, almost to the point where I'm like, fuck, I got to start posting again. But when I look back on what was really the case for that, that process happening, going from living on social media and seeking validation from others and wanting those vanity metrics and people to see, oh, look at what I'm doing, I started to realize that the more and more it would be the same thing. It would be taking the same trip. So the act of going on that vacation wasn't the issue. It's the reasoning behind it. Going on that same vacation, but documenting the whole thing because you care about the vanity, you care about what other people get to see you doing. Oh, he's on another trip. Oh, he's catching another flight, yada, yada, yada. Whereas I genuinely love the trip. I really enjoy the memories that are made, but I'm being there in those memories. No, I'm obviously not here. Don't take anything I say out of context. It was like, oh, well, like, I want to go on these trips and I want to document it because I want to start my own travel vlog because I want to be able to travel the world and get paid for it or get all these amenities. Yada. Fine. Hear what I'm saying. I don't care if it's the trip. I don't care if it's the car. I've got some friends that, I know some people that make huge to-dos out of buying the exotic cars and having delivery parties where they invite all their friends and everyone comes and they celebrate them winning, and then inevitably that shit ends up for sale 6 months later. Whereas I've got some friends that have owned exotic cars for over a year plus and have never even posted about it, right? I'm a car guy. At one day, it's a goal of mine to own an exotic car. Kind of a toss-up between a few different options. We'll start ironing that out as that time gets closer. But for me, it's because I'm a car guy. I grew up a car guy. I love cars. They make me happy. Car shows make me happy. People at car shows make me happy. Talking about cars makes me happy. Not only that, it's funny because when I go, like, can't really relate it to exotic cars. I've driven a few of them, but I don't really have these experiences to speak on as far as personal experience. But like when I would ride my motorcycles, it's funny, the group of guys like always wanted to impress the girls. It was the little kid with his face, glued to the glass, watching out of his car, looking at these motorcycles, thinking like one day that's going to be me. Like those are the ones I wanted to impress, right? Like throw a wheelie up, whatever the case is, and just show him what's up. That's what, like, man, it's just, it brings out my inner child. It brings out some of these goals that I've had my entire life. At some point they became more and more tangible and more realistic and more of a conversation. But that's why I want some of this stuff. It's not because I think that someone's going to view me differently. Now, also, to be completely vulnerable and transparent, I have to have the conversation of, I'm also not an idiot to know that having certain cars like that and having certain things do produce different conversations. Stallers in, Uncaged, we talked to him a lot. Dude's got like $2.5 million worth of cars. And, one day I just simply asked him, I was like, have your cars paid for themselves based off the conversations that they've created, which led to relationships, that came from that? And his one word answer was yes. And, so I'm not, the justification for me financially can come from other places that say, all right, cool, because there are certain people that do perceive me differently based on specific things. Now, I'm not necessarily saying it's got to be a car. How do you trust someone to build you a nice house, a nice quality, pristine house if they live in a double wide? Not knocking anyone that lives in a double wide, but you start to figure out some trust factors, right? And that's a slippery road. Road when it comes to your industry, what you do, how you are perceived. Mind you, I came from marketing and stuff, and so people would look at you if you didn't have quote unquote nice things, because that clearly meant you weren't good at your job, right? So there's a lot that kind of gets really pulled into these black holes that start to produce an environment for us to develop an ego. And the problem is when we don't have a pulse on it, when we aren't paying attention to it, when we aren't keeping that ego at top of mind and in check, it starts to grow. And as that ego grows, you start acting, quote unquote, out of character. Well, is it really out of character if that's who you are now? Again, becomes a difficult conversation, because my objective here in Uncaged is to create an environment where vulnerability and transparency are at the forefront of our position as brothers and as an accountability group. Because the thing is, a lot of men have egos and don't want to be told that they've done something wrong. And I think the conversation does need to be pulled on, where does that derive from? What past trauma, what emotional response, like what triggers you to always want to be right? Now, for some of us, it's that we don't want to let anyone else down, right? You said you were going to do something. You didn't do it. It causes an issue, whatever, and then we start to want to become triggered. And so whatever your trigger response is, whether that's lying about it, whether that's blaming someone else about it, whether that's getting angry at the person that's questioning you, whatever the case is, it's a whole different conversation. But when we start to look at who you are, like in your soul, like positive intelligence, like, you know, again, going back to Stoller, and there's probably not it's not a coincidence that he is as successful as he is, and also probably equally knows himself the most out of anyone in the group. But he puts a huge focus on understanding yourself, which is actually the reason I've gone down such an internal personal development road, is like getting comfortable with my demons, like understanding why they are there, understanding why certain reactions happen, understanding why some things can trigger me and others don't. And for me, that ego, you know, personally, like, I don't like letting people down. I don't like the fact to think that someone can't count on me. And so if something happens where I fuck up, originally that trigger response was to find something to blame, was to find an excuse. Because if I could come up with this elaborate excuse, and I'm not necessarily saying it was a lie, but it was definitely an embellishment on the reality, which is, now my approach is extreme ownership. Everything's my fault. Because at some point I had to grow up, and at some point I had to develop, and at some point I had to hang up the ego and realize, what is the core basis of an ego? And when you start to go down through this, we put this wall up and we give it a name and we call it an ego and act like we're doing these things based off an ego, when in reality, if we were to set that wall to the side, you know, so now the pet name ego, you are to set the ego aside, which is this defense mechanism that you have now built up. And the more that you don't address it, the bigger that wall gets, the thicker it gets, the harder it is to get through. When you start to put that to the side and hear people when they say, hey man, like, this could have been done better, the ego's not there now. So you're like, you know what? Extreme ownership. You're right. It could have been. Now you have officially gotten better. Now, obviously, there's a few other steps that we have to process through on, like, all right, what went wrong? How did it get wrong? How can we prevent it next time, right? And you go down this entire process. But if you start to really, truly think about, hey, man, like, this could have been done better, you're like, fuck, man, it could have been. But you apply that to your life now. The next time that situation comes up, guess what? No more problems. You are now better. You're now smarter. You are now stronger. You are now more developed. Now, isn't that something to have an ego about getting better? So because we put our ego aside and took extreme ownership on the situation that is at hand, we now got better. which is something worth having an ego over. Who doesn't want to be better? Who doesn't want to grow? Who doesn't want to be stronger, smarter, faster? What is it that we have to start doing to start not only hiding or sheltering the things that we aren't good at, but bringing them to light? What is it that we can be doing to bring attention there, to focus on this stuff? In business, especially my previous, organization, one of the biggest things we did was R&D on what we could be doing better. And part of that is creating a SWOT analysis, which is understanding the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats within these organizations. But then you start to take a self-reflection with that same type of analysis and say, what's my strengths? That's a good thing. I want to know. I don't want to have an ego, but I want to be prideful in the fact that I'm good at a few things, right? So what are our strengths? Then what are our weaknesses? Like where am I vulnerable now? Because at this point, it's not just Zack that suffers from my weaknesses. It's everyone else that depends on me, my family, my uncaged brothers, my friends, my fam. Like because I had an ego, I personally had an ego, and so I didn't focus on my weaknesses or my threats. Everyone else suffered. How do you have an ego about yourself knowing that their blood is on your hands? Going back to, a lot of these people that I know that brag and flex and want everyone to think that they're just, life is great. They wake up every day anxious and depressed because they know that blood is on their hands. And a lot of those guys are going to bed every night with a ticking time bomb. They're just waiting for it to go off. They're just waiting for everyone else to find out the reality that they aren't who they really say they are. They want to show the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris because they want you to think that they're super successful and financially stable, when in reality their bank accounts are negative, right? We talked about this on our expert call last night in VIP, and being very, very honest that like the more amount of money that you make doesn't fix your problems. You have to fix your problems before you can keep more and more of your money. A lot of people like to focus on the gross revenue, not the net revenue. They want to brag about revenue and not profits. Like they really want you to see how much money they make, but not see how much money they keep. And that creates a vicious cycle, but the root of that problem is ego. And so again, that's why we're trying to build up this culture inside of Uncaged of being able to be open and honest and vulnerable and transparent, because that's what allows true growth to happen. Because we can't, it's like the doctor. The doctor's like, hey man, what are you on? I'm not the police, but I can't help you if I don't know how to help you. It's kind of one of those things, in Uncaged, there's a lot of people that can help. Financial advisors, business coaches, relationship experts, like you name it, health, wealth, relationships. Like Uncaged is chock full of people that can help there. Learning how to make more money, save more time. There are people in the group that can drastically help you there. But none of us can help if we don't know what you're dealing with. So you're going out there because you got an ego. You want to act like you're healthier than you really are. You want to act like you're wealthier than you really are. You want to act like your relationship's better than it really is. You want to act like you're making more money than you truly are. You want to act like you're saving more money than you truly are. And you want to act like the amount of time you spend working on your shit ain't nowhere near what the amount of time that you truly put in. Or vice versa. Maybe you're not doing shit and you want people to think that you're really putting in a ton of work. Whatever the case is, when we start to really open up and get vulnerable and transparent about like where we are and where we stand and the struggles that we're facing, because it's a kick in the teeth sometimes, and it's not something that like I am excited about in the fact that other people have been through struggles. But one of the coolest fucking things about Uncaged is I have yet, knock on wood, because I mean obviously I don't want to wish any ill on anyone, but I have yet to hear a story where someone, especially someone new coming into the ecosystem, is like, man, I'm really struggling, bro. I'm really fucking dealing with XYZ. And don't get me wrong, it's heavy. It's heavy, heavy, heavy. But I have yet to be able to not provide them with another man in the group that has been through the exact same thing or is going through the same thing. And so when you start to understand that, like, we're all the same. We're all going through the same struggles, especially when it comes down to finances. Now, obviously, ego, and the reason I brought up the ego today, there is a lot that is based on the financial, part of it, but it's not just financial. It's everything in life. People have these false realities built up in their head that some of this stuff fucking matters, or that people care about that stuff, when in all reality, like, I just want to make sure that you're a good fucking person. I want to make sure that you're doing the right fucking thing as much as possible. Like, I want to surround myself with people that actually give a fuck about doing what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it. And I'm a realist. I understand that shit doesn't always go as planned. I don't want to say I could care less if things don't go as planned, because obviously we would like to have realistic expectations and see those follow through. But more so than the right thing happening on the first try, I just want to know that I'm surrounded by people that won't fucking stop until the right thing does happen. So guys, if you are out there, if you're dealing with an ego problem, get into the free group, get into the VIP group, whichever one you're in. If you want more information about VIP, please ask. But get into those, groups, make a post, admit what your ego is, admit why you have an ego, admit where it's coming from, and ask a real fucking honest question on other members' experiences on how they were able to overcome it. Because I promise you, like I said at the beginning of this video, if you have an ego, it will leave you broke, alone, and in an early grave. And that is not something that I plan on surrounding myself with, people that are just out there in the world, not giving a fuck about it and ignoring those three big things. So if you're in Uncaged, if you're still watching this episode, it's because you actually believe that, you understand that, and you don't want to have an ego. So get in the group, get engaged. That's how you're going to get value out of it. And we'll see you next time.